This video is brought to you by a test. What's up guys, Helen here. Now, if you're a fan of the MCU, Star Wars, Game of Thrones, Lost, and so on, you may have a mortal enemy, spoilers. And I get it, everyone wants to be taken off guard when we learn that Darth Vader is Luke's daddy and to revel in that surprising surge of emotions.
No, I am your father.
And at least one person is going to angrily comment that I have spoiled Empire Strikes Back for them, and you know what? I'm not sorry. Because if we turn our attention to the Star Wars universe, there's a surprising lesson we can glean. Spoilers aren't as evil as you think. I might dare say that sometimes they're even good, and can make a viewing experience better.
If one is to understand the great mystery, one must study all its aspects, not just the dogmatic, narrow view of the Jedi.
And if you want proof, we can turn to the excellent animated series Clone Wars, which fills in the gaps between episodes 2 and 3 of the prequel trilogy. So let us explain why spoilers are actually your friend in this Wisecrack Edition on Clone Wars. And yes, obviously, spoilers ahead for all of the Star Wars films and Clone Wars. And also, Lost? But before we get into it, I want to give a shout out to this week's sponsor, A Test. Here at Wisecrack, we love to cover all your favorite movies, TV shows, and video games. You know the shtick. We pick the topics that we know our fans will love, and if you have a business, you can probably relate. You're constantly making decisions based on your customers. A Test is here to make those choices even easier. A Test is a consumer research platform that's easy to use and gives you quick and insightful reporting. With A Test, you can access an audience of 100 million across 49 countries to get the info you need to scale your business. Is your brand activity working? Will this creative resonate? Get all your questions answered with A Test. Their consumer data is reliable and impactful, so much so that brands like Microsoft, Santander, Gymshark, and Walgreens utilize their research. In a world of too much information, you need to cut through to stand out. So test every hunch, remove all doubt, and grow without guesswork. Get started with The Test today by going to askatest.com/wisecrack or just click the link below. That's askatest.com/wisecrack and start growing your business today. Now, back to the show. And now, a quick recap. Sandwiched between episodes 2 and 3, Clone Wars follows Anakin, Obi-Wan, and the crew as they fend off the growing Separatist threat. And while you might be skeptical of a series where we already know what happens, spoilers, the Republic falls, Anakin turns to the dark side, and all the Jedi get murdered, Clone Wars, like other prequels, leans into its spoiled ending. In doing so, the show totally inverts what many believe makes for good storytelling. To understand why, we need to lay down some lessons from Storytelling 101. While it might seem obvious to some, when we watch TV, we're not engaged in a purely intellectual activity. Sure, our brains are working, but they're working in a very particular way. According to playwright David Mamet, this is because storytelling is not the communication of ideas, but rather the inculcation in the audience of the instincts of the hunt. And while it might seem ridiculous to compare me on my couch to a hunter-gatherer, Mamet's point actually makes sense. As the images flash across my screen, my brain is subconsciously piecing together everything I've seen in an attempt to figure out what happens next. This kind of engagement with the story is what screenwriting guru Robert McKee calls narrative drive, and it lies at the heart of dramatic writing. It's the reason why you can't put a good book down, and it's the reason why the writer of this script binged 3 seasons of Castlevania in a single night. And don't worry, we promise he's okay. He just wanted to know what we all want to know. What happens next? But how can a show like Clone Wars create a sense of narrative drive if we already know the ending? I mean, really, would you suffer through 6 seasons of loss if you knew that the survivors of Oceanic Flight 815 were dead all along or something? I mean, I don't know. Honestly, I didn't really get it. But in the case of Clone Wars, I 100% know how the larger story goes down, because I've seen episode 3 and have critical thinking skills. Chancellor Palpatine turns out to be Darth Sidious, executes the infamous Order 66 to massacre all the Jedi, and convinces Anakin Skywalker to cross over to the dark side.
Good, Anakin, good. Kill him.
In other words, it ends pretty horribly for all our heroes. So, in theory, Clone Wars should possess zero narrative drive, and the story should fall flat. But the reality is way more complicated.
Don't understand. You've all been deceived.
Clone Wars doesn't make us wonder what will happen next. Rather, it makes us wonder how we'll get to the end we already know, and in the process, it uses some pretty cool tricks pulled straight from classic tragedy. Now, it might seem strange to a culture that's hell-bent on avoiding spoilers, but the ancient Greeks didn't necessarily believe that knowing the ending of the story could ruin the viewing experience. This is probably because most Greek tragedies centered on well-known mythic heroes, whose plights were common knowledge. Sure, killing your dad and making love to your mom is bound to shock audiences in any time period. But for the ancient Greeks, the story of Oedipus was old-hat incest stuff. Audiences at the time wouldn't have been necessarily riveted by the twists and turns of the plot. Instead, these plays relied heavily on a literary device called dramatic irony, in which the audience knows something that the heroes don't. Like if there was a scary person behind me, and you knew, but I didn't know, and I made a joke about how safe and alone I was. Dramatic irony is when Oedipus spends much of the play, Oedipus Rex, searching for the dude who murdered the king and brought disaster upon Thebes, unaware that it was him all along. But the audience knows the truth, and as such, Oedipus's futile actions throughout the play arouse some deeply felt pity, and also you just want to shake him for being so silly. In fact, the act of seeing the inevitable play out in front of their eyes allowed the Greeks to vicariously experience all these emotions seen on stage, something Aristotle called catharsis. Importantly, none of this is too different from how audiences today view reboots, or even new Star Wars franchises. After all, we knew how episodes 1 through 3 were going to turn out, largely because we know how episodes 4 through 6 went. And sure, we might have been caught off guard occasionally.
Now this is pod racing.
But we knew Anakin's fate from the start. Watching these films wasn't about the destination, it was about the journey, man. And this is where Clone Wars really excels. To see what I mean, let's look at one of the series' most memorable arcs involving the infamous Order 66 to kill all Jedi. While Jedi Knights lead a clone army charge against the Separatists, one of the troopers under their command, Tup, begins to act, well, strange. Essentially, the poor guy's brain begins to malfunction, causing him to act on Order 66 before Palpatine has actually given the go-ahead to do a low-key Jedi genocide. Of course, we as the audience know that's where all this is headed, but our heroes haven't the slightest clue. We know more than they do, which creates dramatic irony. They think Tup has simply been infected with a virus. It's not until his friend Fives gets involved that any of them begin to learn the truth.
An implant? You mean this isn't an accident? Someone did this to Tup?
Precisely.
But because we know the end, we know that Fives' journey to expose the truth will ultimately fail, and our Jedi friends are super screwed. We're not sucked in wondering how Fives will pull off a triumphant victory. Rather, we're just sitting with the grim knowledge that he's just taken another step closer to inevitable downfall. And it's a downright gut-wrenching process when Palpatine frames him.
He tried to kill me.
Even the ending is an emotional roller coaster in which a frenzied Fives tries to explain to Anakin what's happening, only to come off as a lunatic.
Well, there's a sinister plot in the works against the Jedi. I have proof of it. I can prove that everything that I know is true beyond a shadow of a doubt!
And that's the tragedy of it, because Fives was right. But this isn't the only time the show employs dramatic irony. Consider the General Krell arc. After Anakin is summoned back to Coruscant at the request of Palpatine,
The Council has ordered you back to Coruscant, effective immediately.
What? Why?
I'm afraid a request was made by the Supreme Chancellor.
General Krell takes over his command. Except the planet they're fighting on is pretty much like Australia at night. Everything is dark and all the animals will kill you. But Krell, being very not chill, keeps sending his men on suicide mission after suicide mission. Meanwhile, the clones are understandably saying, seriously, what the f***? I mean, Krell kind of sucks at his job.
Krell may do things differently, but he is effective in getting them done. He's a recognized war hero. He may have had some victories, but have you seen his casualty numbers? More troopers have been killed under his command than anyone else.
But we, the audience, know exactly what's going on here. The Separatists and the Republic are both secretly controlled by Chancellor Palpatine and the Sith, and General Krell is clearly in league with them. And more importantly, dramatic irony colors everything we see in this arc. While war films frequently criticize senseless violence, the critique here is dialed up to a 10. Men are literally dying for no reason, fighting an engineered war that culminates in clones killing clones.
Show them you're not the enemy! They're clones!
And we, the audience, are horrifically dragged along for the ride. Now, it's actually interesting to bring up war films as a genre, because they employ many of the same narrative tricks as Clone Wars. That's because, even if your only exposure to 20th century history was Call of Duty, you probably know that Hitler died and the Allies prevailed in World War II. Wait, is that a spoiler? Instead of brewing tension over the overall outcome, these films focus on the smaller, often tragic stories of people swept up in these larger-than-life conflicts. Whether it's John Miller from Saving Private Ryan or Tom Blake from 1917, these films ask us to care about the little guy as he struggles in a war he has little power to change. And it's the same in Clone Wars. Over and over again, the show asks us to empathize not with the figures leading the Republic's wars, but the clones who are caught up in this struggle. Fives, for example, frequently questions his place in the struggle. For one, by asserting his individuality, he rejects the prevailing view that clones are simply cogs in the Republic's war machine.
Master Jedi, we must terminate this trooper immediately.
I am not a piece of hardware. I'm a living being!
But he also questions the very notion that any individual should sacrifice themselves for a larger cause.
I'm sorry. I cannot just follow orders when I know they're wrong. Especially when lives are at stake.
But these questions are rendered even more potent and tragic by our own knowledge that none of it ultimately matters. The war is for nothing, and the clones will all become brainwashed, Jedi-murdering tools. But this dramatic irony extends well beyond the new side characters. It also recontextualizes the way we see some of our iconic main characters. Now, despite being the best of the prequels, Episode 3 is not a perfect film. Anakin's fall from grace wasn't exactly handled well, even with all the foreshadowing. He goes from loving husband to child-murdering, jealous bastard all in the space of 45 minutes. But Clone Wars decides to work backwards from this ending, painstakingly showing us how Anakin was always one bad day away from the dark side. For example, when Padme tries to broker an understanding with the banking clan, which, by the way, is just Switzerland, she has to work with her former fling, Rush Clovis. But Anakin is none too happy about the situation, and orders Padme to stop seeing him.
As your husband, I demand that you tell the Chancellor you are stepping down.
Eventually, this jealousy metastasizes into Anakin trying to kill Clovis in a fit of rage. While this all makes for some great TV, it also massages Anakin's rough character transformation in Episode 3. After watching 7 seasons of Anakin as an abusive, controlling husband, we understand the logic behind moments like this.
You turned her against me!
Of course, it goes without saying that dramatic irony doesn't filter down into every single aspect of the show. There are some characters whose fate is not predestined by Episode 3. And this is part of the delicate dance of Clone Wars, balancing the stories of our tragic heroes with some traditional heroes as well. Take Anakin's Padawan Ahsoka, for example. When we're first introduced to her, Ahsoka is a wild card whose story we don't know. So when she gets framed for blowing up a Jedi temple, we're on the edge of our seats, wondering whether or not she's gonna be executed.
You've already made your decision, haven't you? This meeting is just a formality!
Heck, at one point, Ahsoka is left stuck in a ship full of clones after Order 66 is issued, and we have no idea whether she'll make it out alive. In effect, Clone Wars can have its cake and eat it too. It can pull from both dramatic irony and more traditional forms of drama to create a layered and truly engaging narrative. In the process, it strives for a greatness that only the original trilogy has reached before. But why is this? How can a low-budget animated TV show hit such highs, while the more recent multi-million-dollar trilogies have arguably failed? We think the answer lies in the show's fundamental understanding of its own smallness. Whereas the trilogies always work on this epic scale, greatly realigning the power balance of the universe with each film, Clone Wars is different. Because the ending has already been written, the show doesn't concern itself with trying to tip the scales in the fight between good and evil. Instead, it dramatizes the little things, like the friendships between characters.
We were always on the run, living hand to mouth, never sure what the next day would bring.
Sounds romantic.
Or even just the dying words of a simple clone.
This is the end. Forget the mission. Oh, the nightmare. I'm free.
In doing so, Clone Wars feels less like the history epic of its cinematic counterparts, and more like an intimate glimpse into the real lives of people living in a galaxy far, far away. And this is why, if a movie or show gets bad after its spoiler, it's probably not that good to begin with. Even if you're precious about your first watch being spoiler-free, you've probably returned to certain films or TV shows time and time again despite knowing how they end. The added knowledge, and the dramatic irony it can bring, can add more depth or humor to a storyline. Clone Wars is better because we know how things shake out, not in spite of it. But what do you guys think? Are we crushing on Clone Wars a little too hard, or are spoilers occasionally a saving grace? Let us know in the comments. Huge thanks to our patrons for all your support. Hit that subscribe button like you're a mindless clone, and don't forget to ring that bell. And as always, thanks for watching. Peace.